Okay, so we are at 3:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining us for InDesign Create a Book Part 3. My name is Caitlin Tips, and I will be leading your InDesign Create a Book Part 3 class today. And I will be assisted today by my chat facilitator, Bryn. Please say hi, Bryn.
Hello.
And I will also be assisted by my tech support, Meredith. Please say hi, Meredith.
Hello.
Excellent. So some ground rules before we get started. Your mics have been muted on purpose. If you have any program related questions you would like to ask, please do so in chat, which can be accessed at the bottom of your Zoom screen on the right-hand side. Your text will only be seen by panelists, not all attendees, and any inappropriate behavior will result in your removal from this virtual program. We will try to answer the questions as we go along, but there will be time for Q&A after the lesson is over, and a recording of this class will be sent out at a later date. So today we are covering some fun information that we'll get into as I continue this presentation, but I just want to iterate at the beginning of this class that again, it's being recorded. It will be available on YouTube, and for accessibility of Adobe InDesign, we have an Adobe computer at all 5 of the Plano Public Library locations, and we also have available at Parr and Haggard what we call our digital creation spaces. Our digital creation spaces, shortened sometimes as the DCS, is a room where we have all of the Adobe software and some audio and visual hardware to help support the creation of videos and digital artwork and more. That's available at those locations for booking up to 2 weeks in advance for 2 hours at a time. You do need a library card to use it, but it is free for usage with your Plano Public Library card. So if you don't have access to Adobe InDesign at home, you're welcome to go to any library or those 2 locations in particular for some dedicated time to work on your book. All right. So at this point, this is part 3 of today's class, and I think we all hopefully know what Adobe InDesign is, but if you're joining us today for the first time, Adobe InDesign is the industry standard publishing application for print and digital media. InDesign allows for the ease of access of page layout and web design, and it's really useful creating posters, books, digital magazines, interactive PDFs, and more, like books. So last week, we really worked on importing our completed book project into InDesign, and we applied our paragraph styles and character styles, and we did a basic overview of what grep was. And we also created our book file and covered how to add documents to that book file and syncing our pages. Now, you may remember last week there's a little bit of an issue with our sync, and when we get into the demo today, I want to show you what I found out. So today's agenda is going to be going over how to create a book cover and how to create an interactive table of contents for your book. And finally, most important is exporting your InDesign file to an Epub and then testing that Epub in Amazon Kindle Create. And if we have time, we will also test it in Adobe Digital Editions. Those are 2 completely free software that will open Epub files, and it's a great way to test that all of your formatting has exported in the way that you want your book to be read. So that's what we're doing today. Before we move on to what some of these terms mean, what they are, some of the specifications, do we have any questions?
There are none at this time.
Okay, good deal. So digital book cover specifications. How are they different from print book covers? Well, a digital book cover will appear on the details page of a book listing. So typically this means it's going to be a thumbnail, which means it's not going to be that full physical 8 by 12 size. It's not going to be 6.5 by 11, which is some of the sizes of hard books. So you really have to think about the dimensions and the image ratio of the image that you're creating. Now, This is going to be different for whatever digital publishing route you go through, but mostly the accepted file formats for your book cover format will be a TIFF or JPEG. And those are just two standard image file types out there. I don't know why a PNG file is not listed there as an accepted file format, but Amazon at least requires either a TIFF or JPEG format. Just as a disclaimer, these formats that I have listed here are geared mostly towards Kindle ratios, but a lot of these are the standard for other publishing avenues like Kobo and Wattpad. It's very, very similar. But continuing on, dimensions of your image, this is their preferred ratio. There is a minimum, so if you're not able to get to this maximum of like 2560 pixels by 1600 pixels, you can drop that down, but the general preference is that you have at minimum in the height, which is this first ratio here, is 1600 pixels as your height as a minimum. And then you should, for your width, have it something like 750, I believe. Now your image ratio is 1:6:1. And this is just saying, again, that for every 1,000 pixels wide, the image should be 1,600 pixels in height. And then your DPI, which is dots per inch, because pixels image, your image that you're designing, it's got all of these different pixels, different dots. And for screen resolution, the minimum DPI recommended is 72 DPI. Now for print, that becomes much higher. If you're doing print, that resolution is actually usually 300 DPI. But for screen resolution, a 72 DPI is what is recommended. And our image size is ideally less than 50 megabytes. You can compress files if need be, but anything bigger than 50 megabytes just takes a lot more space, and it also will increase your load time typically. And our color profile should be RGB and not CMYK. And that is because CMYK is actually your color preference for the printer. That's how you communicate to your printer. And RGB is for digital screen resolution, because you don't have to worry about cyan, magenta, yellow, or black. On the screen, you just have the option of working with the standard color wheel. So making sure that your color is configured correctly is incredibly important to make sure that on different types of screens, the image displays in the color that you are actually trying to achieve. Okay. Any questions about our digital book cover specifications?
There are none at this time.
Okay, cool. Feel free to add that in the chat though, if you think of anything as we continue. All right, and then we get into Epub. So we are configuring our book. We are going to do the final export today as an Epub file. And it literally just stands for electronic publication. And this is sort of the symbol for the Epub file. When you just do a Google search, this is what pops up. It's supported by many e-readers and it's available for most devices. The International Digital Publishing Forum, also known as IDPF, has designated EPUB files as the technical standard for digital publishing. So just because it is the international format, if you're going to go any other route with your digital publishing needs, you can export your InDesign files and many different types of file extensions. You can still export it as a PDF. You can export it as, well, there's a few other options. Today we're doing a reflowable EPUB. You can do a fixed EPUB. It's all about connecting it with your final output needs. So if you find that an EPUB doesn't work for the avenue of publishing you're going through, just remember that your InDesign file gives you a lot of flexibility, and you should be able to adjust the file type to suit your needs. Epub just happens to be the most common file type, usually accessible by digital publishers. So just keep that in mind as we go along, that this is just one example of the output you're trying to achieve. Okay, so we've gone through that information. We're going to get into Adobe InDesign now. So I'm going to do a new share. And while I get that, just want to check in with everyone and make sure, see if we have any questions.
Still no questions.
Excellent. All right, so you should see the InDesign file up, InDesign application up now. And on the screen, I actually have my book file open. So this is the beauty of having a book file. If you open it directly from your file organization, you can open this. It'll open just the book panel. It'll still have this normal accessible intro screen pulled up, but your workspace is also pulled up as well. We just have nothing open. So what we're going to do, because today we're going to be creating a table of contents and book cover. Scrolling through here, you can see I have a table of contents file created, but I don't have a book cover. And I will actually not be including my book cover in the book file, and I'll explain why. But I'm going to go ahead and drag that to the side because I don't necessarily need it now. And I'm going to put my paragraph styles back over here in my panel as well. And we're going to actually open a new file. And you can see here, it's our normal new file, new document window. And I want to mention that for your book cover, you do not have to do this in InDesign, but you can do this in InDesign. You can also, if you're really good at graphics and you're familiar with something like Photoshop, you can definitely design your book cover in Photoshop. You can also use other free resources that are online like Canva or any kind of Microsoft Word application if you really want to. I am comfortable with InDesign, so that's just what I use for everything. I may have mentioned this in other classes, but InDesign is a vector-based software like Adobe Illustrator. So everything you do here can be scaled appropriately. Adobe Photoshop is a raster-based system. So it's a very good software for images and image creation. So you could also work on creating a graphic for your cover in Photoshop and import that into InDesign. Same goes for Adobe Illustrator. You could do the same. So we're going to name this book cover example, and we're going to go here and look at our measurements. So again, with our units defaulted to pixels, this actually works great for us because we can actually just go here and type in the 2560. I'm clicking tab on my keyboard to get down to the height, and we can type in 1600. And we can change our orientation to portrait. Now, if you really wanted that to be landscape, I suppose you could, but we actually do want this in portrait. And you can see the height and width measurements adjust. Now, this 2560 is my height, so I'm actually very happy that it changed. Just another fun fact that even if you're not thinking about it, you can double check your measurements that way. Because this is our book cover, and because this is a digital experience, we also don't have to really worry about margins. We don't have to worry about that edge line. So again, reminder, this clip link here, when it's broken, you can adjust one and it'll just affect the one. When it's linked together, you can change one. Well, change one, hit tab or enter on your keyboard, and all of them should change. So again, just a nice feature. I'm going to go ahead and actually add in a bleed, even though this is digital publishing and it's not strictly necessary. When you design something, you want to make sure it's going all the way to the edge. And this is important for your book cover regardless if it's print or digital. I just find that it's a nice finishing touch. So we're going to go ahead and click create. And as a reminder, that bleed creates that separate exterior red line. I didn't add a very large bleed because again, it's not as important for digital. It's just something I wanted to make sure was added in because I like to make sure that I have that nice clean edge with my graphics. Okay, so a general good rule of thumb when you're thinking about a digital book cover is think about some previous examples that you have seen recently. If you do not have if you're not familiar with ebooks, definitely check out our Libby app. The Plano Public Library offers access to ebooks, audiobooks, and that's a great way to just scroll through and check out what other authors and other publishing houses have been doing recently with digital publishing cover trends. Lately, there's a lot of covers that are very simple, very iconographic, but the one thing that I will point out is that currently there are not a lot of book covers that have just a white cover. And that's mostly because white light from the screen is actually very hard on the eyes, as is blue light, right? So when you're designing your book cover, having the white space is actually a lot harder on the eyes than having something like a very vivid, deep cover. So that's just a good reminder for everyone to start off with that output, thinking about what colors will match the theme of your book, the content of your book, as well as how is this going to impact your reader? Is it going to give the favorable impression to your reader when they're that first impression of seeing your book cover, seeing the title, making sure that everything matches up. So I've been working with that Project Gutenberg example of Pride and Prejudice. So whenever I think about that book, it's older. It's got definite themes throughout the book, and connecting that back, I've seen a lot of Pride and Prejudice covers over the years, and I've seen everything from very traditional covers to very modern covers. So today I'm just going to try and show you two different ways of accommodating both. And all right, so just to get started, we're going to start by adding in some color. And how you do that in InDesign, we're going to use this rectangle tool over here on the left-hand side. And so that does change our cursor to that four-lined cursor point right there. And I'm going to click and I'm dragging. And I'm just kind of filling the page. And InDesign likes to pop up with these helpful green lines for resizing, which shows I've got everything matched up, lined up effectively. But it's defaulted to nothing. Now, I can click over here in my panel and I can select swatches and have some basic colors pulled up right there. And you can see that right now, if I hover my mouse over the top square in that panel, it pops up with fill, which is X. And if I click X, it actually switches to the stroke, which is the exterior line. And it's also defaulted to none. Now, I want this to have a fill color. But if I were to click off, it's going to actually try and have me create more squares. Control Z, because I didn't want to do that. So this is, again, just a reminder to always, when you're done with a tool, click your black arrow, just because I don't think anyone wants to find themselves creating 500 rectangles on their page. Another helpful reminder is if you click the escape keyboard button on your keyboard, it should default to your black arrow tool and get you out of whatever tool you're last in, just as a helpful reminder. I find that very useful. Now, just playing with colors, if you already have something in mind for your background, you can always load it in if you've already defined those color swatches. If you haven't, that's okay. I'm going to show you an easy way, I can speak, easy way to add a new color swatch. So if you click this 4 line in the upper right hand corner, it's called a hamburger, funnily enough. So if you click this hamburger right here and click new color swatch, it should pop up with this new color swatch window. And you can see that it has the color type process spot. Spot is only useful for print. Now, if you are going to convert this to print later down the line, this is just important to be aware of, that you would want to convert certain things for, again, the end output that you're looking for. And for color mode, again, we want to leave this at RGB because this is for screen resolution. But if you're going to go with a print output, you can just configure this to CMYK. Now, if you're going to work with a printer, again, you can ask if they have a preference on printer ink, because some of them do use these Pantone Plus specific options. So if you're going to, again, I mention it just because it's useful if you're starting off with book publishing first digitally and you plan to go to print. If you're going to do any kind of special printing effect like metallic or pastel or a embossing, then this is where you would change it to spot color, and you would designate specific print swatches for that feature. And you would use the slug in your document creation to post those instructions to your printer. So I just like to mention that. Again, we're going to leave this as RGB. You can see that we just have the red, green, and blue to play with, and it starts off at black. But I find the best thing to do is literally just start dragging along. You can also click this dropper to click and highlight certain things, or be like, oh, I like this color. And you can drag until you kind of find something. But again, I really just prefer to play around until I kind of get the color that I'm looking for. If I'm creating a new color from scratch, and I know kind of what I'm looking for. Now, with this being Pride and Prejudice, I'm looking for something that's traditional but has a lot of modern capacity to it. So I actually like this dark teal that I've got right here. And that's because for me, it reminds me of a peacock, and what's in the title, Pride and Prejudice. Peacocks are known as a theme to have a lot of pride, implied with that iconic graphic kind of image there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to make sure that this is added to my swatches. So it is down there. And if you, okay, it keeps on defaulting to that. If you click on that and you, well, swatch options, sometimes it lets you actually rename, but right now it's defaulting. There we go. So this box right here, it's actually a checkbox, name with color value. If you want the color value, that's completely fine. If you want to actually name this the intention, so cover background, then click OK. You can actually name your colors if that works better for you, just for organization or remembering, oh yeah, that was my cover. Now, this is a very deep color, and that's actually okay. It's all about what you contrast it with then. In terms of appropriate color recommendations for your cover, again, think about the content of your book. You are the author, you know it best. You can hire someone and give them themes and content ideas of what your book is about if you're not going to make your cover yourself. But if you're doing all of this yourself and you want to get something simple and eye-catching on there, these are, again, just nice things to think about. Colors I would avoid are very bright. So opening this again to the new color swatch to kind of help identify what I wouldn't do is you could do something bright like red, but I wouldn't do something bright like yellow because again, as a reader looking at that color, after a while, it's very, very hard on the eyes. So I would stay away from having large quantities of like highlighter colors. So what I mean like that are like that bright like green, even bright light blue. Because even just looking at this for a little bit, my eyes are kind of not enjoying staring at that for long periods of times. Does that mean you can't use it? No, absolutely not. It's just about the quantity that you're using it in. So you could do a font in that color. For contrast, you could do like an image of a lemon on your cover if that fits. And that's not going to be that jarring to your reader. You're trying to communicate with them themes of what your book is about, something that catches their eye and makes them go, huh, what is this about? Or what is this cover conveying? Or this looks fun. Or if you're writing a mystery, you want to imply a mystery. If you're writing a romance, you want to imply a romance. And again, I highly recommend going through the genres of recent publishing and look at what kind of covers they're using because these things do go in themes, go in trends. Right now, for romantic covers, for instance, covers are highly like stylized and very simplified graphics of couples. It's very, you look at it and you can tell it's a romance. And for fiction, they're also going very simple in terms of the graphics. They're going for simple singular graphics on a background of color. For mysteries, it's hit or miss. Mysteries still tend to be more photographic based, deep colors and simplified like landscapes that imply mystery of what is this, where is this, so to speak. And fantasy is very, very heavy on artwork. So again, think about what your genre is, what you're publishing, and try and connect that back with the images that you use. The other portion of this is just again thinking about what key information do you have to have on your cover. So yes, having a good graphic, having a good background, but we also have to have our title, and we have to have your name, the author name on there, and then we also have to think about, is that too plain? Should we add a graphic? Well, today for this first one that we're doing a more modern but also traditional take on Pride and Prejudice. So I've got my text tool selected now, and I'm going to click and drag just a random sized text box, and I'm going to type in Pride and Prejudice. And you can see I can't read that at all. It's incredibly small. We're going to highlight everything, and you can see over here in the paragraph styles window that this doesn't have any of the styles that we have previously created. Now, fast way to do that in a new document is to click that hamburger in the panel and load paragraph styles. Now, if you weren't in any of the previous classes, there are recordings of how you create a paragraph style on YouTube. And you're welcome to review that. So any of these documents that we've previously created are fine. We're just going to click chapter 1, and you can see that all the previous styles that we've created are there. We're checking all, and we're going to click OK. And it's now showing up here in our paragraph styles menu. And I'm going to go ahead and use the same formatting as the chapter subheading, but that's actually a lot smaller still than what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click that paragraph style to pull up the options. And going here, I'm going to go ahead and increase in this style. I'm going to see what 72 looks like. And that's still far too small for this. And again, remember, the cover is not going to go into our book file. We don't want to export this in with our book because this doesn't have to go in there. We're going to put it all together in our publishing venue. So I'm actually happy to go ahead and type in here something like 150, click off preview, click it again, and it's still very, very small. So we're going to try something extreme. And that's a lot of what InDesign is sometimes playing around with different formatting styles, different things just to figure out what's working. And you know what? I'm okay playing with that. Now we have some overset text here, which you can see that pops up as an arrow down here on the left-hand side. So that's not great, but we're going to click and drag and we can see that if we wanted this centered, again, drag, that purple line pops up, or you can use this align tool, make sure it's aligned to page and just center and center. But we actually want this higher. And I'm actually not sold on having pride and in the same line. Another thing is you could separate all of this out into each word has its own text box. It's not completely necessary to do that, but it is an option. And I can tell you right now that I don't like this black against the green. I think that's way too hard on the eyes. And I just adjusted the magnifier because I wanted to have a better idea of the size that I'm working with, and now holding control. And if you have a MacBook, hold command, but control plus just to zoom in. Now I can see that entire workspace that I'm working with, that entire page. And it's also close enough to where I don't feel like I'm missing any details. So now my text box feels a little too big. I'm just going to resize that in. But again, the first thing I want to do is really address this font color. And you actually address that in your swatches panel as well, because your text also has a fill and stroke. And we're going to change this to white. Because remember what I said, I would not do a cover in white. I would not do a cover in yellow or this really highlighter colors there. But it's good in small quantities. And this is a really good break color against this background. So I think I like that white more against this black here. I'm still just wanting to resize my text box more. I'm going to go ahead and fix that alignment a little bit. And this is still very blank and it's very, very traditional looking. So I don't know how I feel about that. We could go a more traditional route with this, but I'm going to add a graphic and see what I think of that. So to load in a file, we do Control D. And going here, I have already found a peacock feather that I like. Now, I don't want it tall like this. So what I just did, clicking and hovering, I have that double kind of rotation tool. It's that curved arrow with an arrow head on either side. You can do this manually, or you undo twice. If you right click and go to transform in that menu, you can also rotate it by degrees, or you can auto rotate it and have it move. Now, fun fact, when you hold your mouse over an InDesign image, that hand will pop up. And if you do that, you're not moving the actual item, you're moving it within its frame, within its container. So I'm Control Z, and you can see it's orange right now. So I'm going to click off because I really don't want that. I want to move the entire image. Again, what just happened there in the center of the image, that hand pops up It's another way to switch to this white arrow tool, which is a direct selection tool. And you can see doing that moves it within the frame. It's not something I want to do. It works really well when you're trying to get a portion of an image, but you want to have the positioning remain where it is. You can also see that right now, this image looks a little pixelated. So if I right click this again and go down to display performance, I'm going to change that to high quality display. And that looks a lot nicer now. It's not nearly as pixelated. So that looks a lot better. And for something simple, I could leave it like this, but we can have more fun. We can have more fun with this book cover that we're creating than we have right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, make sure that this is centered because I get very OCD with my digital work. And I'm also going to show you how to apply some fun background layers. So this is traditional. It's modern just in the sense that it's very simple and simplified. But we're going to have some fun. And actually, we're going to draw another box, and we're going to have this one the size of our text box. And you can see the last swatch I had selected was that blue, so it has defaulted to that blue. It's also covering up our text now. So switching back to that black arrow, because I don't want to draw another rectangle, I'm going to click this. I'm going to right click, and now I'm going to arrange, and I'm just going to click send backward. And still doesn't like that, so I'm going to try again, send backward again, and now it's behind our font. Now again, these are two colors I would not pair together, is that blue and that white, because it's very, very jarring on the eyes. So going back here to swatches, I'm going to go ahead and actually select our color background, and I'm going up here to tint, and I'm going to mess with that because what it is it's actually playing with the color's opacity, and it's a great way to actually kind of make adjustments with the same color family as before and have just a slight adjustment. And if you find you like that, great. If you're like, I don't know about that, looks wonky and weird, you don't have to keep it. It's totally fine. I just want to show you capabilities of working with something in InDesign today to create something that will help you get done what you want and need to get done. Now, this is the exact same size as our text box. So if you go to layers, you can see everything we have on this page, and you can see the two rectangles. If you click here on that square, it'll show you exactly what layer you're selecting. So this is where I really like to adjust things with my keyboard, and you can move things that way. So if you're like, I don't know about that, you can play around with this. You can make it different. You can adjust the positioning. If you are like, I don't think that works for me, you can resize this. You can have it behind the feather. You could have this really played with a lot of different ways. You could add a purple, again, play in with the peacock theme. This does not have to be something perfect the first time around. I just want to show you the specifications necessary to create a final cover. I'm looking at time, and I want to make sure that we get to the other things today. So we're going to go ahead and say that we have a cover. This is a workable cover, and we're going to go ahead and save this in our file. I'm going to save this here, saving it as an InDesign file. And then we are actually going to go ahead and export this. And export brings up this window in InDesign. Right now it's defaulted to Epub. We're going to actually change this to JPEG. Now there is not currently a way to convert this to TIFF. If you really decide you want a TIFF image file, I would highly recommend working in something like Photoshop, as that will get you that higher resolution that you're looking for. But for something simple, for something very simple graphic wise, a JPEG will work just fine. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And this is where we get into some of those other specifications that I mentioned earlier. We're going to go ahead and leave the quality high. We're going to go ahead and leave this as a baseline. Now our resolution, we just need that minimum 72. We don't need 300. That 300 is recommended for print. And our color space, we want to keep this to be RGB because that is the color specifications we have used thus far. We have not used anything configured for CMYK, so it's very important to make sure that this converts effectively. So we're going to go ahead and export. And now just to show you that that converted correctly, I'm going to open this and share that real quick before I show you how to create your table of contents. So do a new share real quick. Where is it? There we go. So now you can see we have a book cover and it's a JPEG and it meets all the necessary expectations for our publishing needs. So we have that there. All right, and so we're going to go back now to InDesign. And we're going to go ahead and start working on our table of contents. But do we have any questions about our book cover creation?
No questions at this time.
Good. That is totally fine. So I've had my book cover, my book file open. And so I was able to open the table of contents file I added to this earlier just by selecting that file. It does not close our book cover. We're able to access that still. But just wanted to show you that this is really, really convenient to have loaded and saved all in one. Another reason why I highly recommend for your book creation that you use book file just to help organize everything. Now, last week I had some difficulty with my chapter numbers syncing correctly, so I'm also going to go ahead and open my chapter 1 and my chapter 2 just to show you that that was fixed. And part of the issue, and this is just a little software glitch that you might find as you're working, is that your text variables, as you're syncing so many documents, it may take InDesign a moment to catch up. So if at first you're like, I know I did this, I know I saved this correctly, just like we were last week, we were updating our numbering. Sometimes you just have to do that a few times. It's like turning something on and off to get it to process correctly. I just was experiencing some heavy lag in my software last week, so I just wanted to make sure that you understood that the process for having your default chapter numbers is still the same. Now, an update that I did make was for the chapter number underneath, in case you didn't want to do just a big number, you wanted to have that chapter number selected. You can default that as well simply by going to type and your text variable. And when you go to insert variable, what I did is for each chapter, I had that as the file name, and you can just have that defaulted in by selecting file name. So however you have it named, if you wanted the text, if I had the 2 typed out, it would have showed up as the TWO. So just a lot of different hacks you can use to get the automated output that you're looking for. Okay, but back to our table of contents. So what I have here is I have already filed and placed in a chapter list that I had typed up in Microsoft Word. And I have also already applied some paragraph styles to this document. Now, InDesign does have an automated way to create a table of contents. You can go up here to layout, and under that menu, there is table of contents. And this does open a file where you can actually apply paragraph styles to pull content. I find that when you're first starting out, this can be incredibly confusing. Also, if you're trying to create something interactive, and by interactive, I mean you want to be able to click chapter 1 or chapter 13 and go directly to that chapter within your ebook. There's an easier way to do it. It's just a little bit more time consuming, but it's guaranteed to work in an Epub file, which is what we're looking to do today. So how you would do that is have your chapter list already kind of typed out like this, have it formatted as you want. And again, this is something viewed on the screen, so you don't want this necessarily centered. Having it orientated to the left will be just fine. But this is where you would actually have this hyperlinks panel open. And if it's not open, again, as a reminder, you would go up here to Window, scroll down, and under interactive, not interactive, sorry, hyperlinks is under, it's under one of these. Links, excuse me. No, that's something different. Sorry, y'all. There's so many different panels here in this menu that sometimes you just have to scroll through and be like, okay, where is this one thing that I'm looking for? If you're like me and you know InDesign can do many, many things, but you forget all of where they live. I was right the first time. It is under interactive, and it's that hyperlinks panel right there. And as you can see, I already have something listed there. But that's what we're going to be doing here with our table of contents. And it's also why I have our book file open. This is much easier to do if you have your book file open so that you can easily reference things that are accessible. But how do you make this accessible? You highlight the text and you actually go over here. I've already done chapter 1, but we're going to go ahead and highlight chapter 2. We're going to have that in that panel open, click this plus button here in the lower right-hand corner. And right now you can see that it is defaulted to URL. If I click that, you can also link to file, and that's what we're doing. When we convert our entire book file together, all of this becomes one document. So it's literally highlighting a place or a page. So it should transfer correctly. And this is where testing your Epub becomes very important, because if you really want this feature available, then sometimes you might have to play with this linking option to make sure everything occurs the way you want it to. So path, that is the name. What we want to do next is go to this file option. It should select the file to be opened. We're going to go ahead and select this chapter 2. Again, all of this is getting converted to an Epub. We're going to do that final export. So the file should become the file location in the shared document. And our character style, you can choose how this appears in the document. You can choose to have it look like a hyperlink. If you click OK and we click off, you can see that now this is highlighted, while our first one doesn't look like anything out of the ordinary. So that's really a preference on your part on if you want this to be, oh, they click it, it looks normal, but they tap on it and they realize, oh, I can jump around our document that way. So this is how you, again, make your document interactive without having to go through the table of contents tool. I just find that this is a lot more straightforward. It does take a little bit of time, so it does mean you're doing a lot of rinse and repeating by selecting all your files and just making sure that this looks exactly the way you want it to. It also helps to, again, once you choose a style, to stick with it, because otherwise it does stand out. So I'm just doing this again. And if you have that highlighted like I did last time, it's going to change that name. Open. Oh, it still did. Okay. Okay. And should open it. Well, I also could have done that incorrectly. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I got the path confused. So you do want it to show that path there to the file. So that's my bad. I got confused there with the name of the link and the linking it to your file path. So we're just going to confirm because I have 4 highlighted. And okay. And that's why nothing is opening. Oh, now we have 4 open because we double clicked on that. So within InDesign, this works as well, which is nice. Again, this is linked to 4. Edit hyperlink. You can update this if necessary. Okay. So we're just gonna make sure that all of these work the way we want it to. And we could go through the full scope of this. Now in my book file, I only have through 16 for today's example, but you could theoretically go through the entirety of however many chapters you have in your book and make this linking work. Okay, so we have a few linked. I'm not going to do the entire thing just for the sake of time. But now we get into the need of exporting our entire book. So it's okay that we only have a few chapters open. You don't have to have every chapter, every file in your book open to do the final export. As long as you have your book file open, clicking that hamburger, you can see all these options. So something I like to do is I like to do the pre-flight book. So what does that do? Is it actually will, you can set the scope to the entire book. You can use a pre-flight profile, which is, I tend to just change it to digital publishing. And what this does is it will check your spelling. It will check your overset text to make sure everything is within your margins, within your guides. And once you click Preflight, it's going through all the files. And now you can see that everything has this green dot next to it. And if there were any issues in the file, it would have a red dot next to it. So for instance, just to show you again what that would look like, if I had that dragged over here and ran that pre-flight option again. Okay, scroll up. Well, it's still showing one. Okay, we're going to do save. And we're going to, again, do that pre-flight because I want to show you what an error looks like. And it's still saying that everything's okay. So, all right, undo, file, save, and let's do something obnoxious like draw that on top. And entire book, pre-flight. Okay, well, theoretically, if this was blocking text, it should pop up with an error message saying, I don't know about that. You may want to check that. So, and you can pull up different messages. So if there were any errors, it would be listed here. If there was any overset text. So what I mean by that, okay, I'm going to make this very obvious. We're going to go ahead and delete page 3. Okay. And so now we have that red there. And now in our pre-flight thing, there is an error. Thank you. Overset text. Perfect. So if there's an issue and you're going to do a final export, doing a pre-flight check of your book is incredibly helpful to make sure that you don't have any kind of basic error with your formatting. So I highly recommend use this feature before you do your final export. It will just save you a lot of time finding small errors in your files. So I'm Control Z because we don't need to have that. Now everything is good. So going back to our book file hamburger here, you can see that we have export selected documents to PDF as a default option and export book to Epub. So this is actually what we're going to do. We're going to export it to Epub. I've already got a folder for that. And we're going to have it be you can see there's the fixed layout and reflowable. I explained a lot of the benefits between the two in the first class, but just as a reminder, reflowable is really, really great for those text heavy content books. If you have more images that you're converting to an EPUB in your document, in your book, I would recommend working with something more like a fixed layout, just so that your images don't conflict with your text. And you would use that anchored image option, and you can make an anchored object a style for an object style, which again, I believe I covered that in the first class as well. So we're going to again select EPUB, reflowable, and we're going to save. And this is going to pop up with this export menu here. So this is just the general options. Our cover, we're going to select none because we're not going to include it at this time in our EPUB file, because for Kindle publishing, they add that in there for you. Now you could actually go ahead and choose image. Let's go ahead and do it today just for funsies. I don't know why it's defaulted to GIF, but we're going to select JPEG. We're going to select the example that we just created. And now look at that, that's linked, it's wonderful. And we can also add in our table of contents, but that is actually already in our document. Content based on page layout. You could also do a default table of contents from here if you really wanted to with the articles panel. There are a lot of LinkedIn Learning videos on that. I think if you're just starting out, the easiest way will be as I've described. The one thing I messed up with is the order of my book file. The table of contents is at the very end, and normally you would want that at the beginning. For the sake of making sure that we have time to show you what this looks like, we're just going through here. Format and resolution are okay. Image quality high is totally fine as well. Most of the default options is going to be okay. I would ignore that message that just popped up. Not as much of an issue. What we're going to do now is I'm going to share the Kindle Previewer so that we can test opening our book. So we have exported our book to EPUB. And so this is a great way to test and make sure that everything looks the way we want it to. Lo and behold, we can see our cover is there, and we have our chapters listed. And again, I made the mistake. I forgot to move the table of contents back to the top. of the book file list. The book file list, the order of it works like the layers panel. So everything on the top in your layers is on top in the page organization. And so this Kindle Previewer is just a great way to see how your book would actually appear in their software. And you can change the page size. You can do the navigation. You can change the device type to see how it would preview. You can also change that font. That's why I recommend taking a look at the font available in the digital publishing software you're going to be used, and go ahead and format that text in one of those approved fonts. It just will make it a lot easier for conversion. And you can also, if you go up here to view and Kindle Previewer, you can change the color mode to all of the color modes that's actually available in the software that your user may view it in. So this is great for you just to make sure that everything still looks okay. This is a great thing about going through Amazon is it's very adaptive. So as long as your font and everything is in there, it should look fine. It all comes down to your formatting and making sure that this still looks good with your formatting. So this is why I said at the very, very beginning that your page size does not matter. Now there's a number of things that are missing from this book. We don't have our table of contents at the very top of our document, as you can see here. I also didn't include in my book file the title page that we created or our publishing information. So this is just purely to check our formatting and show you some helpful tips and testing that before you go the final route of being like, I'm ready, and uploading something that maybe isn't exactly formatted the way you want it to. So this was the Kindle Previewer. I'm just going to minimize that. I'm going to do a new share with Adobe Digital Editions just to show you another software that you can check your Epub files in. So here we go. So Adobe Digital Editions is also free, and you can you can open different files in here. So you would, well, to open it, you'd add to library, and this is where you would go find your file that you just exported. And lo and behold, there it is. And it will show you again your formatting scaled to your window size. You can, I believe, play around with some viewing differences, but it's not as interactive as the Kindle Previewer to show you what it looks like on different editions. But it's a great way, again, to test that your formatting is appearing the way you want it to. So are the line breaks where you want it to? Is it running together for whatever reason? Is your drop cap there for indicating your chapters? Again, just kind of beneficial to see how that looks. And you can see if there's things that are missing from your formatting. So going back to Adobe InDesign, I'm going to go ahead now and move that to the top. Our style source is still chapter 1, and I'm not going to update the numbering or anything because that's still exactly as I want it to be. But yeah, there we have it. This is, again, a really broad overview of your book creation to get you from A to B, to help you understand the tools that you need to start from you've got your book written and now you need to format it for digital publication. So Are there any questions? Is there anything I can go over with these last few minutes of class?
There are no questions currently in the chat.
Okie doke, not a problem. Then I'm just gonna, since we have a few minutes, I'm just gonna go ahead and switch back to my PowerPoint to show you that list of resources that we have. So if you're wanting to look more into book creation, then just as a reminder, we have LinkedIn Learning courses. So if you want to go in depth into any more features, I highly recommend InDesign CC to Epub by Anne-Marie Concepcion. She's a great teacher. She knows all the ins and outs of InDesign. So if you're wanting to dive more heavily into it, that's a great course. I also find for specific troubleshooting needs in InDesign, their Learn and Support page is a great resource, as well as their community forum for this isn't working right. How do I fix this? There are users of InDesign all around the world who are just happy to help people troubleshoot and make things work. The Kindle Direct Publishing, if you're going that route as well, has a lot of helpful topics, and their community forum is very active. Additionally, with your Plano Public Library, we have a Book a Librarian available where you can book a 30-minute session with a Plano Public Library staff member to assist with a specific inquiry. So for instance, with today's class, if you want some specific help with setting up your book in InDesign, you can definitely book a librarian session to help you get started with your book formatting project. And again, just to reiterate, we have available at Haggard and Parr Library our digital creation spaces. If you want some privacy or just some dedicated quiet space to work on your book formatting needs, or if you just want to go to your local location, all locations do have a Adobe computer available on the public floor. If you aren't sure where it is, feel free to ask at your front desk. Thank you all so much for sticking with us for these 3 weeks. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel for review. So if there aren't any questions, just thank you again.